Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Art 186 Computer Graphics with Adobe Illustrator for the spring semester 2022. Today I want to cover two things. One is I want to talk about your final assignment a little bit, which is an architectural, I put in there an architectural detail, but it's meant to be an experimental piece, so you're not restricted to doing architecture. I put that in there as a choice for people. Others have done portraits, for example, and you're welcome to do that. I have an assignment, a portrait assignment. So if you would prefer to do that, you're welcome to do that. If you can think of something else that excites you, then go ahead and choose that. My goal for this assignment is to be experimental, for you to use tools and techniques that you haven't otherwise used in this during this semester. Okay, so that's one of the things that we're going to talk about. I'm going to show you a couple of examples again of what students have done in the past to give you some idea of what's possible. And then I want to introduce the perspective tool. That lesson has been deprecated from the book. I guess they feel it's not that important anymore. I think it's an interesting tool. It's not perfect, but for those of you who aren't familiar with perspective, there are 1, 2, 3 point perspective, and they have a guide for us to use. So that's what you're looking at on the screen right now. But and we will watch about a half an hour series of videos on it as well after my introduction. Those videos that we will be watching will not be published, or if I am able to publish them, they will be available on Canvas. So we'll see. It's kind of iffy. But if you have a lynda.com or a LinkedIn Learning account, it will be available there. You can just look at the titles and look under Adobe Illustrator Perspective, and you'll find it. There's a bunch of them, in fact. So to give you an idea of some of the projects that others have done, I'm going to show you one that got an award last year in the student exhibit. And this is one of the final projects. So yes, it's architecture. It's a 1-point perspective. It's pretty outlandish, pretty cool, very 60s. It looks, very much like something that you would see in the 60s, kind of psychedelic and that sort of thing. Just a big hallway, but kind of cool. A lot of use of textures, a lot of use of patterns. Notice the text that's being used. It's warped and really kind of cool. Really, really nice. Then another architectural piece that was done that I've submitted for this year, that was done last summer, is pretty straightforward. It's broken down into basic shapes, basic colors, very simple, very elegant. Okay, of the, I believe it's the Sydney Opera House. Okay, I think it's Sydney. I know it's an opera house. I know it's in Australia, and I think it's in Sydney. So this would be another really good example of architecture. Then I've already shown you the examples from the portraits, but it doesn't hurt to show them again. So here's one, very loose, expressionistic kind of style. The others are much more stylized, broken down into maybe 3, 4 tones for the faces. You have white. You have a light tan color for skin. You have a medium and a dark tone. And then some of those same values are being used in the hair and some not. But the shape's very straightforward and simplified. This is a very popular style these days. And these are the next series that I'll be showing you are really done well, really elegant. Here's another one. It was done by Serena Chen. Again, very simple, important shapes broken down. Didn't show every strand of hair. simplified top. Really, really beautiful, elegant. This one I thought was really powerful too. This was done several years ago, and I continue to show it today. They're all along the same lines in terms of their interpretation and style. And then the last one was done quite a while ago too. And this one is much more photorealistic. And again, to get something like this is compiling layers upon layers. It's of shapes. It's starting with your basic overall shape that you have for the silhouette and assigning a color to it, and then assigning, then more generalized shapes with colors and soft gradients and that sort of thing. And then the finer the details, the smaller the shapes that are layered on top very last. This takes quite a while to accomplish, something like this. I'm not expecting anybody to do it this way. Richard was unique in that regard. I think I mentioned before, he already had a degree in art from Cal State Long Beach when he took my class. And he just wanted to come back to Cerritos to learn computer graphics. So these are some of the examples, both architecture and portraits. You don't, as I said, you don't have to do either. If there's another kind of project that you would like to do that you can treat as experimental, that you haven't, a style that you haven't approached before, and to use tools that you haven't done before, then be my guest. Okay? So there we have that. I'm going to put these away so we can talk about, let's see, I want to bring this forward and we can bring this one back. I'm moving these things around on my other screen here. So what you're looking at on my screen right now is 2-point perspective grid. And if you're wondering what this tool is over here, okay, this is for perspective. It's the one right below the shape builder and right above the gradient, or actually the gradient mesh tool. So it's, wait a minute, where did I say it was? Yeah, it's right here, the one that I have selected. So let me hide it and I will show you how it works and what it can do and what it can't do. And then we'll pause. I'll stop the recording, see if there are any questions, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you the videos, okay, from lynda.com. So I'm going to go ahead and to hide this, you go to View, and you come all the way down here to Perspective Grid, and I'm going to select Hide Grid. So typically when you're working with perspective, you're working in horizontal format, but you don't have to. And just to let you know, there are 3 types of linear perspective. There's 1-point, 2-point, and 3-point. So those points are vanishing points. The vanishing points lie along the horizon line, and they are where parallel lines appear to meet to create the illusion of depth. Okay, that's what perspective is all about. These grids that I'm showing you used to exist in charts where you could buy from an art store, but now that they're available in Illustrator, you don't need them anymore. So if you want to bring them up, you can either go over here and click. Let's go back here and say, I want to select the perspective selection tool. Come on. There we go. Got the grid tool. And by default, it gives you a 2-point perspective. So what you'll see over to the left, this little dot right here represents the left vanishing point. The one to the right represents the right vanishing point. The line where they meet right here, I wish they had labeled these, is your horizon line. So this is considered in perspective a 45 degree, where you're seeing the same amount of like a cube on either side, and your eye level is right in the middle of it. So if you want to change the sides for any reason, for example, you want one side shorter than another, one side, instead of being equal, then you can click on either vanishing point and I can begin to move it. Okay, I can move it in. And you can see now that it's getting more and more foreshortened. And let's go ahead and let's move this over. So I have this still available. Okay, if I want to change the height of my object, I can do that. I can click up here and I can move this down. So now I'm actually looking on top of it. Okay, so I don't have a grid on the top, it's down below. I'm going to go back a step or two. I'm going to bring this back up like so, and I'm going to pull this back out like so. And I want to show you also what's available. I want to show you that the 1 point and the 3 point perspective. More often than not, it is the 2 point perspective that people use. But let me give you a look here. And also understand that when you are using the perspective tool, you really only have one perspective view per file. And that's it. You could try to use others, but they're not going to match. So I'm going to go to view. And I'm going to go down to perspective grid, and that's going to give me some options here. I have 1 point, 2 point, and 3 point from here. And you can also save your own perspective grid down here, meaning if you want to define the grid yourself. We can also hide grid from here. We can show rulers if you wish. We can snap to grid, which I find to be advantageous in most cases. You can lock the grid if you want, and I'll show you that. You can also lock the station point, which is really beneficial because then what that'll allow you to do is rather than your station point lies directly in front right now. And if you wanted to turn it, so imagine yourself turning the cube in a, spinning around in different direction, you can change your station point, which represents where you, the viewer, are standing in relationship to the object. So let's look at 1 point perspective right now. Let's see what that looks like. So it's like here's the train tracks. And here, if you have a vertical wall, horizontal, and you have a single vanishing point, and that's it. We can also look at the 3 point perspective. So we'll go to do that. I'm going to switch again, go to perspective, perspective grid. And let's go ahead and show 3 point perspective. And now we have that. Now you can see it's like if you're looking at the top of the building, and I'm going to go ahead and if I move it here, again, notice how I change it. If I move it from down here, now watch, if I change it from here, the whole thing moves up. Okay, so imagine yourself on the top of a skyscraper looking down. Not only do the parallel lines along the horizontal vanish on a vanishing point, but the vertical lines now change as well. And if we zoom out a little bit more, whoops, I didn't want to do that. I could change this and let's try to move this. I haven't had much success in the past, but if I try to move this and move it up, let's see if I can't get this to go in the opposite direction. There we go. So now I can have this up. So imagine if you would, now it disappears, the grid disappears. So let me undo that. What happens if you were to turn it around would be if you've ever watched a haunted house movie or a horror film, and you're looking up to a building or a house on the hill, and again the vertical lines appear to come to a vanishing point. Well, this is the grid that you would use for that. So how does this thing work? Let me switch back to 2 point and I'll show you. So I'm going to go back to view. I'm going to select perspective grid, and I'm going to select 2 point. I'm just going to use the default. There we go. So let's look at what each of these does. If I click on this point at the top, this allows me to change the height of my cube. Okay. These, as I pointed out, allow us to move the vanishing point in or move it out. Okay, and we can go back to its original point if we wish. The same on this side. If I click on the outside points, this allows me to change my eye level because this is the horizon line. So if I move the horizon line up, I'm changing my eye level so it's higher. If I move the horizon line below, notice what I'm doing now. I'm looking up at the object. So I'm going to leave it just for simplification, leave it right in the middle here. And then if you don't want the cube to be that long, you can also click on these points and I can change the measurements and I can make it smaller. It's really unnecessary to do that. So you still have the basic cube, but now we're looking at it, maybe it's a 1x2 cube or something like that. Okay, so let's pull this back out. Now, what if I want to rotate the cube? Well, before I do that, let's go ahead and we can do that from here as well. That's what this one does. You see, you can shorten or lengthen the sides. And each of these grids, the units in the grid represent whatever unit length you want. They could represent an inch, a foot, a yard, a mile. It's up to you. Okay. Then down here, we can click on this. Okay, and I can move this point up. I'll move it back down so it's here. We can also take and move each side out if we wish. I caution you about doing that, but it is possible because it will be kind of out of perspective when you do that. And getting it back where it's supposed to be is kind of difficult. So I'm going to turn that off and turn it back on. I shouldn't have moved that. The same with this. That's moving things up as well and down. And that's okay. So that changes the bottom of our horizon. The horizon stays the same, but you can see that it changes its position of it. So we're not looking down on it so much, but we're a little bit higher in the level. So I'm going to go ahead and rather than try to reset that by hand, I'm going to go ahead and go to view and I'm going to go down to perspective and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back to 2-point again and it will reset everything back to the defaults. Until you save it as a custom grid, it will always take you back to the original. Okay, so how does this work? You'll notice that there's a little widget in the upper left-hand corner. We have the left side is blue, the right side is orange, and the bottom is white. So if I want to make a rectangle, for example, on the left side in perspective, I make sure that that is selected. I come over to my rectangle tool and I can come up here and making sure I'm going to go ahead and pull this off so that we are using the perspective tool. So I'm going to go ahead and you'll notice that there's a couple of options here. Okay. We have the perspective grid tool and we have the perspective selection tool. So let's watch what each of these does. I'm going to go ahead and with the square, and to draw it in perspective, I want to make sure if I want to make it on the left-hand side, I want to make sure that the left button is selected. And there are keystrokes for these. This is a 1, this is a 2, no, that's a 3. This one is a 2, okay? So I'm going to select the 1. I'm going to come over and because we have snap to grid turn on, I'm going to go ahead and click and drag. And you'll notice that it automatically goes in perspective. Pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to flip. So I have black color. Let's go ahead here and for the fill, let's make it red, just for the heck of it, okay? And now let's say I want to make the right side in perspective. Well, now I come back up here and I select the right side. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the rectangle tool again. And I'm going to click and drag. And now I have the right side created. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change the color of this. Let's make it orange. There you go. Okay. So now we have a simple cube that we've made here. And let's say, for example, I wanted to put an ellipse in perspective. If you're not aware of it, ellipses are nothing more than circles in perspective. So again, perhaps with the right side selected, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch to the Ellipse tool. Okay. And I'm going to change the fill color. And let's make it, I don't know. Let's make it blue, just for the heck of it. Nope, I didn't want that selected. Let me undo that. There we go. Let's make sure that we have, I want to make sure it's deselected so that when I select another shape, I go ahead and I can build on it. So now with the Ellipse tool, I'll make sure that the fill is blue so it doesn't change the color here. But watch what happens when I click and I drag here. There we go. So even when I hold down the Shift key, which is a perfect circle, it puts it in perspective. Now what I can do is I can also, if I want to switch to the other side, I can go ahead and I can select this. Let's go ahead and select this. And with this selected, I'll go ahead and move it over. So I'm going to select the Move tool and move it over like so. And notice that it switches to the other side. And it's in perspective on the other side. That is really cool. Okay. So another thing that you can do is you can put text in perspective, or you can create, if you have windows or doors or that sort of thing for your building that you want to put in perspective, you first put them in just a orthogonal view, just a flat 2D view, and it will put it in perspective for you. So let's go ahead and deselect. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the text tool, and I'm just going to make some text over here. Okay. Let's go ahead. Hopefully my computer will not crash. Please don't crash. Please don't crash. It crashed this morning, fortunately at the very end of my talk. So let's go ahead and change the size of this. We have 12 point. I'm going to make it 48, 60. I'll make it 48 point. And I'm going to put, I don't know, Jack in the box. Okay. Now what I can do is I can select the perspective tool, move tool. Whoops, the other one here. Here we go. I want to select this tool. Oh, come on. Select this. And notice as soon as I click and I drag it, and here, it puts that type in perspective. That is really, really cool. So what this tool would be useful for doing, I don't know how many of you are interested, but for kind of a product design, to do a product comp, maybe you were creating a box of tea, you know, the design for a box of tea or perfume or something like that. This would be a great tool for doing that. Okay, let me see if I can't find another one up here. Let's look in our, oh, come on. I'm going to go ahead here. I don't want to arrange them. I want to change the workspace here. And I'm going to reset Essentials Classic. And I wanted to make sure that I had some of these images up here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click and I'm going to drag out flat 2D flower. And let's go ahead and select the right side or the left side. And I'm going to click and drag it. And as soon as I do, notice that it puts it in perspective. Let's go ahead and make it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and drag over it. So you can see it a little bit better, and deselect. So again, it's putting them in perspective. And again, if I switch to the other side, let's go ahead and switch, and I click that, and I move this over, it's going to flip. Whoops, come on, come on, come on. It didn't change the side. It didn't change the sides yet. But it is important to note that as I move it forward, since it didn't change the sides, notice that if you bring it forward in space, it keeps it in perspective and it makes it larger. If I move it back in space, it proportionately makes it smaller and in perspective. But again, if I want to go ahead and I want to move it to the other side, I got to make sure that the right side is selected. Select that, and it keeps. Let me go ahead and there we go. I hit 3, the 3 button, and that allowed me to do that. Okay. So I don't know if this gives you a question here for by Arturo. Yeah, the 3-point perspective. Yeah, it's the same as what you learned in our art class. It's identical. It's not used that much in buildings, or it is in architectural design, but it's done again with CAD systems and stuff now. It's rare that anybody actually draws that by hand. But yeah, that's what that does. But see, since I've started this drawing in 2-point perspective, I can't change it to 3-point. It doesn't work. You have to pretty much have an idea ahead of time and know in advance what it is that you want to do. Because if I change the grid now, if I go up to view, let's say that's all I'm going to build in here, and I come back here and I change it to again, I'm going to go to perspective grid. I might be screwing this up. Let's change it to 3-point. I changed it, but it doesn't change my drawing. So I can continue to build using the 3-point perspective, but yeah, what you're looking at the moment was 2-point. This is 3-point. It's when the vertical lines of the cube begin to converge downward or upward that it's 3-point. But yes, you may, if you learned that, that's correct. Okay. So I'm going to go back to view, and I'm going to switch again to, where are we? Perspective grid, and I'm going to switch back to 2-point, just so that I have it all there. Okay. So you can see that if you take 2-dimensional objects, maybe there's in here, there's a library of, I know that I had some in the past. I'm not sure. Did you, when you, okay, the question is, Professor, what if I click on view and I don't see the perspective grid? Did you click on the perspective tool over here and did it pop up? Okay, then what you need to do is go to view, and you need to come down here under perspective grid, and then you need to say 1, 2, or 3-point, and then select which one you want. And then it should pop up. Any luck? So anyway, this is a way of saying that instead of an architectural building detail, instead of a portrait, if you would rather do something like a box of cereal or a perfume box or a box of tea that you're designing, this would be a good tool to use. Okay, I was hoping to find, but again, if I were to drag this out like so, see when I just drag it out, but now when I click and I drag it again, and I hit 1, it's going to flip it to the other side. Now I have my splotch on that side. In perspective. It's pretty cool. Okay. Now, my personal taste is, because I teach 3D modeling, I would rather do something like this in my 3D, in a 3D modeling program. Because then I could control the lighting, I could control the surface textures much better. And even if I wanted something very simple and stylized, I could do that. But if I wanted to rotate it in space, I could do that. Now, it's too late for me to do that. So let me do this. Let me go ahead and create another artboard. Let me see if I can do this. I'm going to go ahead and I wanted to show you how you could pivot the station point. So the box is not going to rotate, and that's the advantage of working in a 3D program. But if I go to View and I come down to Perspective Grid and I select that I want to lock the station point, like so, and now when I come in here and I move one of these, let's go ahead and bring up this perspective grid. There we go. And now when I click on one of the vanishing points, notice how it pivots about the top. So let me undo this. Let's go ahead and I'm just going to start a brand new file. It would be easier if I do that. And hopefully nothing will crash. And it doesn't matter. I'm just doing a vertical piece here. There we go. So again, let's go ahead and let's bring up the perspective. If it's not showing there, I go to View. I come down to Perspective Grid and I say Show Grid. Now it's there. So watch what happens when I lock the, because the station point is directly in front of this. Okay, right here, this line that I'm pointing out to you. So technically the viewer is directly in front of it. Since our eye level is right here, it represents you standing in front of this cube. If I wanted to see keep the station point the same, but I wanted to rotate the cube, and this is how I would do it. I would go to Select, and then I would go to, not Select, what am I saying? I go to View, and I go back down to Perspective Grid, and I say Lock Station Point. And now when I click on one of the vanishing points, I can rotate it. Notice that I can rotate the side. So instead of a 45 degree, maybe I would use a 30-60 degree. And let's go ahead and let's change the page to horizontal now instead of vertical. I'm going to view this lengthwise here. So let's look at, where are you here? I'll do it horizontal. There we go. So notice how I've stretched one vanishing point way out and I brought the other one in. So again, if I want to change it, let's go back. But again, once it's fixed, you want it to stay at that. So let's go back, and you can't tweak it after that unless you want to start your drawing over. So let's go back again. If I rotate it, okay, so maybe I want more of it to be on that side. And that generally makes for a more interesting drawing rather than 45 degrees. That's kind of boring. But if you have something like that, it's a 30-60, and then you come back in here, maybe you shorten this side even a little bit more. So this makes for a more interesting perspective as far as I'm concerned. Okay. Any questions? Brissa, did you ever get it back? No? Really? Okay. Tear off the perspective here. And let me go ahead and reset it. So you need to go to View, go to perspective grid, and then I'm going to turn off, I'm going to leave snap to grid turned on, but I'm going to go ahead here under 2-point and then make sure that this is selected, and notice it went back and it should become visible. Let me go ahead and pause my recording. I'm going to actually end the recording and say that's for me, it's sort of it for today. I'm going to pause it and I'm going to end it. And then if you have more questions at the end, I'll be happy to answer them. But I will, I'm going to try to post what I've talked about so far for the past half hour, and then that will be it. But I do want to show you the other series of videos that I have from LinkedIn Learning. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop the recording.